Vengeance by George Willson. Chapter 7. Remembering Failure. Darla Hemingway sat at her desk in her well-organized classroom looking at the headline of the paper, which read, "Wife of Slain Teacher Arrested." The story contained a mugshot of Athena Michaels and detailed the story of the murders to date, including what happened to Sherry last night. Darla shook her head in dismay. Though she had good reason to hate Hank Michaels, she was not sure she would have gone to such lengths to get rid of him and everyone he'd ever been with. Sure, she talked big sometimes, but in her heart, she would never go through with it. And to kill students? She shook her head again at the thought. She glanced up to look down the rows of empty desks to the one student that remained in her classroom. Mindy Zimmerman was 20 with long brown hair and minimal, if any, makeup. She wore a wooden cross around her neck along with a plain dress shirt and jeans, which pretty well described what she wore every day. Tucked within the papers and books she carried around was a Bible that Darla knew Mindy read when nothing else was going on. At present, Mindy was working to finish a test that they would have normally called a time limit on, but given the events going on at present, the dean had asked that students be given some leniency on time and their tasks, as he would be doing for the teachers as well. This situation had become a nightmare for everyone, and the best they could do was try to maintain some semblance of a normal life. It was hard, though, the more that happened. Hank and Jody were a surprise, and then Scott and Jenny being killed just off the campus grounds brought it too close to home for everyone. A lot of the kids had gone home if their parents lived in town, and some had left the school altogether until the crisis could be confirmed as over. Then Sherry Duke was killed. 2 teachers down had created more chaos to the point that the school was mostly a ghost town. The police department had stepped up security on campus along with everything they were trying to do to combat the problem, but everyone in town knew they were spread very thin. It also didn't help that a police officer had been killed, which further scared everyone involved. Darla wondered how long it would be until the police did something more drastic to protect those who were associated with Hank. She knew she would have to be a target, and she was honestly scared for her life as well as anyone else that man had unwittingly dragged down with him. Darla went back to the article, and further down the page there was a picture of Hank. It was his staff picture taken on campus at the beginning of the term, and Darla even remembered him sitting for it since they had gone together. She touched it gently, remembering the last time she had seen him. She had entered the lounge that day, and he was already standing by the coffee pot with a cup in his hand, sipping it. The rest of the lounge was empty as they tended to arrive a bit earlier than everyone else. Darla closed the door behind her and locked it. She knew no one would think anything of it, since the door's lock was a little cantankerous and occasionally got stuck. People often placed something in the doorframe to keep it propped open, so no one got locked out. It made moments like these very easy to attain. Darla slinked across the room to him. Under her pink jacket she wore a white top with only spaghetti straps. With her jacket on, no one would know, but with her jacket off, which she tossed onto one of the chairs as she approached him, it was very enticing, and she knew it. He took one more sip of his coffee as he turned to her before placing his cup on the counter behind him. She stopped in front of him, her breasts only a paper-thin distance from his chest. She was only slightly shorter than him, so she was easily able to look into his deep brown eyes. She had something to say, but part of her still wanted his attention first. "Hank," she began, but as she expected, he grabbed her and kissed her long and hard, like they'd done many times in many parts of the school, along with his house on occasion before leading into other things. This time, though, it wouldn't go so far, even though part of her wanted it. She felt this conversation was too important, and she would not be able to focus on what he wanted until she had it out there. Once the opportunity arose, she broke the embrace and stepped away from him. "Did I misunderstand something?" Hank asked as she stopped an arm's length from him. "I thought you might be up for a quickie." "Actually, Hank, what I wanted to talk to you about is a future to this relationship." She had considered how to broach this topic many times, and while she wasn't sure if that was the best lead-in, it was all she had come up with. "A future?" he asked, almost amused. You know, of course, that I'm married. Seems we both do, she said, annoyed. What are you going to do about that? What do you want me to do, Darla? Well, to the point, she said. When are you going to leave your little wife for me? When can I see you outside of all this secrecy? Why? He asked with that insufferable grin plastered on his face. Why? Because otherwise this relationship is a total dead end. I never said it would be otherwise. No, but in the beginning you also never said you were married. You acted like you were available, and this was going somewhere, and as soon as I start talking about the future, you drop this bomb of some wife at home. That wasn't fair to me. As he listened to her, Hank casually picked his cup of coffee back up and took a sip. He returned it to the counter behind him and crossed his arms with a sigh. So what do you want? I want to be your life, she said like it was the most obvious answer in the world. I want you to leave your wife and stop flirting with everyone on campus. It's a wonder your wife doesn't know, but I do, and for me, it would have to stop. Why? He asked indifferently. You aren't getting enough action out of me now? You want more? I want you exclusively, she said, practically begging for the possibility. Instead, Hank laughed. Exclusively? Do you honestly think that I'd be faithful to you when I'm not even faithful to my own wife? And exclusivity is right out. Maybe you don't love her like you love me. I love a lot of people, if you follow me. But she is an excellent housewife. A lot better than the last one I had, for sure. She's like the free maid that I can bang every once in a while. What would you bring to me? You can't cook, you can't clean, and I wouldn't be faithful to you anyway. I already get what I want out of you. I don't need any more than that. Darla was shocked. For him to just say it so callous and unfeeling was unreal to her. He treated her like some kind of object to be measured and either purchased or left at the store. Or worse, like a plaything that he can discard when he gets bored. She could not contain her anger. She slapped him across the face. He only smirked as he took the blow. You bastard, she said, trying to keep her voice down. How dare you speak to me that way? I'm not some cheap whore you can just screw whenever you feel like it. I don't know, he said with a shrug, his grin returning. You've made a good one so far. Darla drew back her hand to slap him once again, but as she was about to make contact, he caught her by the wrist and changed his tone to one of business. Miss Hemingway, please do not redden my face before my next class. I could tell the board, she threatened. I know about your other flings. Student-teacher relationships are forbidden. You'll be fired. Never work in this field again. They also frown on adulterous relationships, Hank reminded her. How would this complaint look coming from a woman disgruntled with a sinful relationship with this teacher? You'll suffer the same fate. I could tell your wife. And I could tell her whatever I want, he noted. Who's she going to believe? Darla's face was red with fury. She knew she couldn't do anything against him. He was far too clever. She grabbed her jacket and put it on, hiding her dress code violating top. She reached the door and unlocked it. Leaving already? Hank called out as she grabbed the door handle. So, no quickie today, then. He rotated his hips in a sexual fashion. Darla just stared at him, all the love she once held for him transformed into hate. I swear, Hank Michaels, one of these days someone's going to kill you and wipe that nasty grin right off your face. Yeah, right, he muttered as he picked up his coffee and she allowed the door to close behind her. Her anger didn't end after she left the break room, however. That conversation carried her right through her day, where she had trouble being civil to anyone, and any time she saw him in the hall it all came back, so she made every effort to avoid him and his stupid, smug expression. The end of the day could not come soon enough so she could get home and away from everyone. When she arrived at her apartment that evening, she walked into her bedroom and slammed the door behind her. Her bedroom was as small as could be expected in a one-bedroom apartment. She had only expected to live in an apartment for a short time, but that short time turned into years as she put off buying a house in the hopes that she would meet someone. That someone turned into Hank Michaels, who would never want to buy anything with her. So she remained in the small apartment with a bedroom barely large enough to accommodate her full-sized bed and dresser. The space between the bed and the wall opposite the door was just enough to allow a nightstand. She threw her purse across the room, followed by her keys. When her purse hit the wall, it turned itself inside out, tossing its contents all over the floor in front of the nightstand and her bed. Her keys nearly implanted themselves in the soft sheetrock, but in the end only left a deep dent before they bounced to the floor as well. She dropped onto her bed and sobbed, "Stupid Hank Michaels. Stupid, stupid man." She glanced at her nightstand, where she had placed a picture of Hank that she had taken of him one day at school the previous semester. He looked handsome and dashing like a regular James Bond, but like a regular James Bond, he thought nothing of loving and leaving her. In a fit, she picked up the picture and threw it across the room, where it hit her solid wooden closet door, dented the wood, shattered the glass in the frame, and fell to the floor. She screamed despite herself and pounded the bed several times in frustration. After a moment, she got up and walked to the broken frame. She fished the photo out of the glass fragments and held it as she crawled back into bed. She cradled it to her chest and curled into a fetal position, still crying over his impudence and wondering what she would do with her life. She hated him, but the hate came out of the love she thought she felt. No, the love she knew she felt. Her early days with him were blissful and wonderful, and she had fallen in love with him. She had decided that he was the one when she had broached that topic the day she learned the truth. Even then, she was sure she could keep him even knowing he was divided. She was not certain what would happen, but she knew her heart was shattered. She wanted to be done with him, but she was not sure how she would ever be able to do it. She hated herself for feeling this way and hated the tears she was shedding. She knew he wasn't worth it. The last thing she uttered before crying herself to sleep was, "Stupid Hank Michaels." Even though the lights were on in her bedroom and she was still fully clothed, she fell asleep, and nothing could disturb her. She slept until the following morning when her alarm awakened her, and she learned of his death on the morning news after her shower. Needless to say, she was stunned, but not entirely surprised. "Professor Hemingway?" a girl's voice said quietly. Darla blinked out of her memory and glanced up to see Mindy standing directly in front of her, holding the test paper. "Sorry it took so long," Mindy said. "Weird night last night." "Yes, I'm sure," Darla nodded. "And then I had to get up earlier than normal this morning," Mindy continued. "The police wanted to talk to me about Professor Michaels." Darla looked at this sweet little girl and sighed. Weird night last night could mean that she had someone on guard outside her place. Interrogation the morning after another murder. She hated the thought of it, but she had to ask. "Why would they do that? You weren't one of those girls who was intimate with him, were you? I promise your answer stays here. I'm not judging." Mindy sighed and turned to her desk. Her head hung low. Darla was afraid she might have offended the girl, but then Mindy shrugged and turned back to her. "It was stupid and sinful," Mindy admitted. "The beginning of my freshman year, and I fall for a teacher. We had a thing for a while, then I found Jesus, joined the college group at Greater Life Church, and cleaned my life up. I'm not proud of some of my past. He wasn't my only guy during that time, but I know that I'm forgiven now, and I'm never going back to that kind of lifestyle. I even changed my major between those first couple of semesters." "You're a theology major," Darla observed. "I started in fashion," Mindy said. "I found a peace that suits me fine." Darla smiled, reminded of why she even did this job. Mindy's story warmed her heart for a moment. "Good for you, Mindy," Darla said. "I'm glad you found something worth believing in." "I did," Mindy said, "and I'm not ashamed to say it." Mindy glanced at the time on her phone. "I've got to run. There's a study on the Song of Solomon I don't want to miss." "I'll see you later. Take care." As Mindy left, Darla looked back to Hank's picture in the paper, the darkness returning. "Well, at least someone's life got better since they met you," she told the picture. She pinched the newsprint at the photo and tore it from the page. She crumpled it up and tossed it symbolically in the trash. Happy to have done it, she continued to read the paper and wait for her next class.